Good afternoon here in Brazil. I think good evening for you. I'm Sandra Madureira. I'm from Pontifícia Universidade Católica de São Paulo. And today I'm going to talk about L2 acquisition, relevant influence factors. I thanks this invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Okay, so if I'm yes, just to show you a view of the city we are in. This is our university on the left, and then an air view of São Paulo for you to see. And I work at PUC de São Paulo, that's the Catholic University of São Paulo, where we investigate 4 research lines. That is language and education, language and language pathology, language and work issues, and language and technology. And we also, this is a view of our university, a picture, right, of the university. And then the other picture is our lab. It's a phonetics lab. All right. Okay, then, before I start, I will talk about the lines of research we do at the phonetics lab. So we have acoustic analysis, perceptual analysis, electroglottographic analysis, and also other kinds of analysis, such as ultrasound analysis to see the movements of the tongue, right? Breathing patterns, the plethysmography, right? And also the automatic analysis of facial expressions. So together with the acoustics, so it would be the visual prosody together with the vocal prosody, okay? And then, these are the lines of research and the kinds of research we have here. In our lab, we have researchers from the Department of Language Sciences and Philosophy. We have postdoctoral students, graduate and undergraduate students. And in relation to L2 acquisition, I've supervised some dissertations and theses. They are mentioned here, and they are included in the bibliography, in the references of this lecture. And the languages involved are mainly Portuguese and English, and Portuguese and Spanish. Now, we also have now, let me show you. We have now a new line of investigation that is supervised for me, by me, and it's on Portuguese and Russian. And this is done by my postdoctoral student, Ana Smirnova. And this is a very pioneer research in Brazil, taking these 2 languages, Portuguese and Russian. And here is a slide that shows you the research topics Ana Smirnova is investigating now. She's perception or production of Brazilian Portuguese sounds, and confronted to the perception of the Russian native speakers, facial expressions of emotions of both Brazilians and Russians, interference in intonation patterns and social profiles of these subjects in this corpus she's collecting, and and several kinds of analysis, acoustic analysis, perceptual analysis, and also facial analysis are going to be conducted. And then, okay, let's then start our topic today, to talk about our topic today, that is L2 acquisition. So L2 acquisition means there is an L1 and L2, and that leads to bilingualism. And well, bilingualism is a phenomenon which has been approached by several disciplines: linguistics, psychology, sociology, and education. And of course, there are several definitions of bilingualism. And consequently, there are different types of bilinguals are considered. So I'm going to show you some of the definitions to give you this idea of bilingualism. Three authors: Bloomfield, 1993, says native-like control of two languages. And then Weinreich, the practice of alternately used two languages. And Leeway, a product of extensive language contexts between people who speak different languages. Okay, I prefer the second definition because I think this is the way we do. We use languages and we shift from one to the other, right? And I think this is Weinreich definition is quite good to express this. And all the definitions of the types of bilinguals, just to show you how many types of bilinguals Leeway mentions in his book about bilingualism, and you see several of them, right? So it depends on, I'm going to show you 3 slides that show different kinds of bilingualism, early bilingualism, and all kinds of other factors that can be considered in being considered a bilingual. Okay, now, bilingual performance, there are 2 kinds of factors that have to be considered. One of them, of course, the linguistic factors, so the L1 and the L2 language patterns. But there are also other kinds of factors that are intervening, and these are extra linguistic factors, so such as age, sex, aptitude, motivation, cognitive styles, personality, learning strategies, right, that are mentioned by Saviri-Troac and O'Malley and Chameau. So these are things too that interests when you investigate then bilingual speech, right? I'm a phonetician, so I'm going to talk about bilingual speech. That is what the subject I'm concerned with. So which are the relevant issues to be considered in this? So I'm going to mention some of them. Okay, to talk about bilingual speech, I will choose the following topics: the speech chain, that is the links between speech production and perception that are mediated by the acoustic signal, right? The foreign accent and its impact, and then the acoustic cues and the discrimination of speech sounds, and then the intervening factors impacting bilingual speech. So, if we consider these all these factors, the first one is the speech chain. This is a very well-known picture which explains how speech is produced and is heard. So we have here first the speaker, right? And then on the right, the listener. And we start here in the brain, right? When that is the linguistic level concerned, right? And then by means of the motor nerves, the muscles, the vocal muscles, are then put into action, right? This is the physiological level, right? And the output is the one that is acoustic, the sound waves. So the sound waves are then perceived by the ear, both of the speaker and the listener, when you can hear, of course. And then the sensory nerves also then are have this feedback, right? And then we come again to the brain, where is the linguistic level. So this is how the speech chain functions. And in this, you see that the waveform is the one that mediates, links what is the production to the part of the listening. Okay, so if we have, so this is the first topic, right? What have we to consider when we are comparing speech and bilingual speech? Okay, another topic that I mentioned is the foreign speech accent. Okay, um, it's not just an issue of comprehensibility or fluency or intelligibility, but also attitudinal judgments. Because when you listen, you are listening to someone who is Brazilian, who speaks Brazilian Portuguese, and is speaking to you in English, right? So a kind of accent, foreign accent, is in our speech, but it depends on the degree of foreign accent that you do have. Because if you have a very strong accent, right, you are not understood. Okay, and also the attitudinal things. You have the vocal stereotypes. People attribute to the speaker way of production vocal stereotypes, right? They think, well, this person is that, and that can be psychological features, but can also be social features, and so on. Okay. Um, I usually, as I told you, I usually have students who investigate the English language. And well, what I do when I'm as a kind of way of calling the attention them to this foreign accent and the degrees of foreign accent, strong foreign accent, weak foreign accent, is to play those sounds. I'm going to do the following. I'm going to, because this is wave, you're not going to hear it, but I can imitate it, all right? I'm going to imitate it. So I play to my students the first one. And in the first one, the person says something that is, we something that we cannot understand. The student says, we can't understand. Well, I asked them to write, and they are not able. This was one speaker, and that was, in fact, a Brazilian speaker speaking English, but she has a very strong accent. So students and, of course, native speakers cannot understand what she says. Now, the others, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the 5 are different dialects of English, and they are understood. Okay, so, and then also a Brazilian, that is also a Brazilian speaker, but this with a very weak accent, and they can understand. So this is the impact that you have when you have weak foreign accent and a very strong foreign accent. And the data you can have here in this, I don't know if you know it, Speech Accent Archive, that you have speakers of a very great number of languages, and you do have the native phonetic inventory. You have the transcription of each recording. You have the recordings, right? You can listen to several varieties of English. People, for instance, Brazilian speakers speaking English, some of them with very slight um, foreign accent, others with a very heavy foreign accent, and all the languages, right? You do have in here. So that examples were from these, right? Okay, and then um, so what happens when you have a high degree of foreign accent? What are the consequences? It doesn't mean that we do not have a foreign accent, but it's the kind of degree of foreign accent that is concerned. So what are the consequences? Well, one of them is difficulties in comprehension. The other one is unfavorable judgments on attitudes and personality. Of course, if you not necessarily right, but you can have this, and stereotypes attributions by listeners to speakers. So um, these are things that has to be considered. And what are the intervening factors? What are the factors that impact the degree of foreign accents? So, if you prefer to Fleig's um, theoretical model, we see that one of the main factors impacting foreign accent is the relevance of the quality and quantity of the input that the speaker, the foreigner, uh, receives in linguistic acquisition. And then there is another feature that is maturation, and another feature that is language interference. All these features are important to be taken into consideration. So let's start with the first one, maturation. That is, we are going to talk about the ability of distinguishing sounds in language acquisition. So, as Patricia Kuhl mentions in the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences in the University of Washington, research results um, argue that the ability to distinguish any sound contrast diminishes after 9 months old, right? So her research, she took babies from 6 to 9 months, and these babies were exposed, for instance, to Mandarin Chinese for some hours. And from 6 to 9 months, the baby can distinguish all sounds a native speaker of Mandarin Chinese does, a baby. So after 9 months, then uh, differences between monolingual and bilingual are found. You see, that's very early, right? And these experiments, they use information, right, with the EEG. Okay. Another factor is language interference. And in order to consider interference, I'm going, as a phoneticist, to refer to acoustic cues. In order to do that, I will give you an example. This example I give to my students who are Brazilian speakers of Portuguese, right? And I ask them, which word is it? Okay? And I'm going to pronounce it as in English, right? It's the word is the word bait. And when the native speaker says this word, all the Brazilians write paid, pagar, right, in Portuguese. All of them. And most of them, right, very proficient in English. But when they hear the word in isolation, they use p instead of b that was produced by the native speaker. And why does this happen, right? So, Brazilians, I don't know if Russian is like that, but in Brazil, there is no aspiration in P, right? So, in English, there is. So, there is a difference in the phonetic cue, as I'm going to show you. So, when we have, for instance, this plosive consonant production, right? Let's consider the elements that are involved in there. Well, the vocal folds can vibrate or not. In p, t, and k, it doesn't vibrate. In b, d, and g, it vibrates. Articulatory, you have the air passage being totally obstructed, uh, and then it's released with applausion, right? And acoustically, you can have silence. This silence, for instance, in the unvoiced sounds, right? And in the voiced sounds, it is filled with a humming from the voicing, right? Of the vibration of the vocal folds. So these are the ways plosive sounds are produced, right? But then there is a difference in acoustic cue between Brazilian Portuguese and English. And I'm going to show you, showing a spectrogram of this. So here you have the word cata in Portuguese, and here you have the phonetic transcription. As you hear me, you can then compare kata, all right, like this. And you have the spectrogram, right? And if you pay attention to the spectrogram, you see that this is interval, the silent interval here, right? In which the dorsum of the tongue is into contact with the villain, right? And then there is the plosion, right? And after the plosion, you have a small interval, and then vocal folds start vibrating for the vowel. The same thing happens in t, right here. You have the silent, right? When in this case, when the blade of the tongue reaches the alveolar ridge, and then you have the plosion, and then you start producing the vocal folds, producing vibrating, right, for the a sound. Okay, so this is the production of the plosive sounds, and then we have another here, another spectrogram in which you have um, the voiced sound. So we can compare. You see that when you say kata in the first one, you had the silence here. But in now gata, this interval is uh, oh yes, there is a question here. I'm going to yes, this is one of the factors, but I consider it afterwards. There is a question saying "bait" is not a frequent word, and then you hear, but also with frequent words, this occur in isolation. Of course, the context, right, gives you cues, right, that you can, of course. Then understand. But what I'm using these examples is not to talk about the frequency or not, but to talk about what are cues, what are acoustic cues. So in here you have the voicing, right? And you have the plosion, right? In here and in here, all right? So I'm going to now compare what you hear in English and in Portuguese. So I'm going to show you now spectrograms in which the two languages are compared. So look at the word bait as pronounced by an American native speaker. You see, "ba" here. This is the one I've used as a stimuli, right? It's a native speaker production. Okay, you see silence. And then you have the plosion, and then you have the vowel, right? This is "p" in Portuguese, exactly the same, exactly the same. And then we are going to see another one that is "p" in English, as pronounced by an American native speaker. Now you see that you have this aspiration, right? It's an interval. It's called VOT, right? This positive VOT here, it's filled with the aspiration. What is this aspiration? It's the air between the vocal folds, right? Okay, and then we can have this compared, right? See, I'm going to pronounce Portuguese here. You see, pata, bata. That's Portuguese, pata, bata. All right? And here you have English. But I'd like you to pay attention to the following. See, you have B here, okay? You have B here. You have all this part, right? Voicing the VOT, it's the negative VOT, right? And this is voicing. So in Portuguese, you voice and then you release for the B. Now, in English, they don't need this. They can do exactly what Portuguese does for P, because they can have silence and then they can have the explosion and start voicing for the vowel. Why can they do this? Because the acoustic cue, because they have this difference in aspiration. So this aspiration, they don't need to have a previous voicing to tell that the sound is voicing. This is another cue. So this example is not exactly to see if the word is frequent or if it's in context and so on. But okay, I'm going to show. Please see if it's okay now. If you can't see my pointing in the screen, because here you see Portuguese. You have. Can you see me? Can you see? This is the interval in which the vocal folds are vibrating for the B in bata, right? This part here. And then, no, you can't see. It's okay. But maybe I can tell you, you see the screen. So you see that in this spectrogram, the bottom part of it, there is a line that is dark, right? This dark line here in bata, you see a dark line between this first waveform and the second waveform, right? So we have this button here in the button, the lower part of the spectrogram. You see that this is this dark line is the voicing of the vocal cords. The vocal folds are vibrating. And if you look at the bathed, you see, look at them. The upper part is bathed, and you have silence. You don't have this black line that is the interval of the vocal folds vibrating. Okay? So that's what I mean by acoustic cues. And this is very important because when we acquire a different language, the cues are different. And some of the cues make us to be kind of deaf. We cannot hear the differences. And that's pointed out in the literature for a long time, Polianovic, Trubetskoy, right? To the concept of phonological deafness, the phonological sieve, right? And Flegg calls attention to perceptual difficulties stemming from phonetic assimilation. It's quite the same thing because it has to do with perceptual awareness. And this perceptual awareness, that's what I gave you the examples before, right? It's attention to acoustic cues which discriminate sounds in L1 and L2. Anna Smirnov has compared the difference between mid-high vowels in Portuguese and mid-low vowels in Portuguese as perceived by Russians. And it's very difficult for a Russian to perceive the difference and to produce the difference between E and E, between O and A in Portuguese. It's very difficult because you do not discriminate the sounds in Russian, right? The same thing here with Portuguese, right? Portuguese learning English, for instance, the difference between E and E, U and U, as in feet, pés in Portuguese, fit, adequar in Portuguese, and look, that is Lucas in Portuguese, and look, that is olhar in Portuguese. It's very difficult for us. And even more difficult, the difference between e and a, as in get and cat, for instance, right? So, gat, right? Okay, so this is what is meant by perceptual analysis, awareness. And this perceptual awareness is the central issue, in the speech learning model as proposed by Flegg, 1995. So perceptual awareness, right? And Flegg produced this model. And to produce this model, he had some research questions. And the research questions were, are certain speech sounds, L2 speech sounds, learnable where others are not? How does the age of time L2 learning commences affect L2 speech learning? Are certain kinds of L2 sounds learnable only by children? If so, why? Can difficulties in producing certain L2 sounds be traced back to inaccurate perception? Okay, so thinking about those questions, research questions, he built this model that has 4 postulates and 7 hypotheses. And I'm going to consider some of them, right? Because I think they are very important in this characterization of the foreign accent. Okay, so let's see what we can highlight from these postulates and hypotheses. Okay, what was the goal of this model? To account for how individuals learn or fail to learn and to produce and perceive phonetic segments. I mean, vowels and consonants in a second language. Well, Flegg did not analyze prosodic elements, although he, of course, considers them very important, and they are, and they interact with those segments, right? But his concern was the production of vowel and also consonant sounds. And this has to do with perceptual awareness, as I told you about the acoustic cues, right? So what are the main characteristics, right, from this model? So The production of speech sounds in L2 depends on the development of perceptual targets. And perceptual targets guide the production of L2 sound production, okay? And difficulties in producing sounds are thought to occur in the absence of these perceptual targets. You see that the model gives much importance to the fact that we do have this perception, right? Awareness, and that's perceptual awareness. It means you have to pay attention to cues, right? And then give you an example. He doesn't consider it in phonological terms. He considers it in phonetic terms. Why is that so? Because, for instance, if you look at the inventory of English and Portuguese and other languages, t is in English, t is in Portuguese, but you see that the allophones, the variations are different, right? You have 5 allophones in here, and you have 2 in Portuguese. One of them, ch, right? And t will be phonemic in English, right? Okay, so let's see then what this perceptual awareness, how does it affects L2 acquisition? And one of them is assimilation, right? What is assimilation? For instance, I mentioned you the mid-high vowels and the mid-low vowels in Portuguese, right? We have, for instance, avô, avó, poço, posso, peço. You have I and E. You have O and O, right? If you do not pay attention to the acoustic cue, or if you are not aware of the acoustic cue that separates the 2 sounds, you are going to assimilate. For instance, you can have e in one language as Portuguese, but the other one has just one, and you assimilate to that, right? It's the same we Brazilians do in relation to English. We have a and a, but we do not have that in Brazilian Portuguese, so we assimilate to one sound that is e in Portuguese, right? And Brazilians can't hear the difference. This is the most difficult vowel pair perception for Brazilian Portuguese. The difference between get and gat is very difficult. They don't in tests, in experimental perceptual tests, Brazilians fail in distinguishing those 2 sounds. And what are the main characteristics of this SLM model, that is speech learning model, conflicting with other hypotheses? We have 2 topics: maturation and then interference from another language. And we do have other theory that had principles about these 2 topics, right? And I'm going to consider the speech learning model in relation to them, right? So first of all, the speech learning model does not claim that all production errors are related to perceptual difficulties. But it argues in favor of the relevance of developing perceptual awareness to discriminate sounds in L2. And it argues that L1 and L2 categories share the same phonological space. And then what are the critics the speech learning model does for the critical period hypothesis? That is, after certain age, it's going to be very difficult for you to learn a foreign language, right? An L2 language. I'm not going to consider the difference here between L2 foreign language or learning and acquisition, right? Not necessary in here. But you see that the speech learning model says there is no critical period for language acquisition, right? Although it considers, of course, that early learning, right, starting then usually the better, but not always, okay? Because experimental analysis has shown that this is not always like this, okay? Even if the child, right, was in an immersion environment, then listening to this foreign language, right, L2 language all the time. Then, so there are counterfactual evidence for this CPH from experimental research work. For instance, speakers of Dutch as L1 and English as L2, they learned as adults and got a native-like pronunciation in English. The same we do have in one of my students' research work, exactly that. One of the subjects that started learning as an adult had a native-like pronunciation. So counter evidence, for instance, from children who are in immersion environments and then live in the United States from childhood, and as adults they have very strong accent. It doesn't mean that this is not usually when you start learning a second language. It's better, but there are exceptions. Okay, so there is no age in which you say, well, now from now on you cannot acquire a foreign language. And then another difference from the speech learning model to now to contrastive analysis hypothesis is that about the interference of the mother tongue, right? Fleck considers that if you have L1, this is going to be good for you to learn a second language, right? And this is for all of us. And then they say that contrastive analysis that all different sounds are difficult, and the speech learning model says all similar sounds are difficult. It's just the opposite um, uh, uh, argument. And this is the speech learning model is based in phonetic experimental um, studies, right? So it's different from just claiming something. It's based on experimental research. And then so we can conclude that the speech learning model contradicts both the contrastive analysis arguments in relation to these topics I mentioned, right, and also to the critical, right, period of hypothesis. Just a moment. Mario, just a moment. That is something about the battery. Just a moment. Mario, 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 Mario. A bateria está fraca, está caindo. Sorry, we are going to check it. I hope it doesn't interfere. Okay, and now we have some thoughts about foreign language or foreign accent. For instance, interference, habit formation, and incorrect perception, right, of the speech sounds. So let's see if okay, what are these important factors, right, about as intervening factors in the perception of the foreign accent? Okay, I mentioned that one adult Brazilian speaker in one of the studies we have, he started learning English as an adult, and his performance was really native-like. And what this is about? Because first, motivation is one of them, right? We do have this motivation factors that also affect. It's not just the linguistic factors, the perceptual awareness, and so on. There is also the individual differences. So, and there is something that is also important, that is the input that Flegg gives so much importance, right? And then, listen. I was telling you about motivation, about pronunciation, interference from L2, and then we think about what is bilingual speech, right? And we have some of thoughts about foreign language, and this has to do with what is the importance of phonetic perceptual awareness. So Flegg means you are what you are, what you eat phonetically. So this is a phonetically based model, right? To explain how is the process of the bilingual speech. And Flegg doesn't mention a formal instruction. And I guess this is a very, very important issue, right? And not only when I think of adults, because of course, this is one of the issues we have to consider, but also from the beginning. For instance, bilingual schools, right? In countries where sometimes children are exposed to L2 language, but their parents do not speak that language, and so on. So I think formal instruction is pivotal in this area. Why? Because you can, from very beginning, for instance, in kind of think games, for instance, for children, of course, not a formal instruction based on phonetics, but based theoretical in phonetics to exposure of sounds, first different sounds and then more similar sounds, and in adolescents, adults as well. I think this kind of formal, phonetically grounded instruction and taking into consideration the perceptual awareness is very, very important. And then we had this approach that is phonetically grounded in extension course offered by the university, and that is it is applied phonetics to improve pronunciation and comprehension in English as L2 for Brazilian learners. And you have this is the course in which we use this background or the need to develop phonetic awareness of the sounds of the L2, right? And then, as food for thought, right? I raised the following questions. Does the quality and quantity of input matter? Is the development of L2 speech sound awareness important? Is the development of perceptual targets an ability necessary to discriminate acoustic cues in L2 matter? Okay, so if so, this is food for thought, right? You're going to think about it. And if it's so, right, and then phonetic theoretical background is very important. And all these things related to acoustic cues and so on are really important. And then being bilingual is a superpower, as Guess says, right? And here, as you have in this comics, it must be nice to be a bilingual, right? And then thanks from Sampa. Sampa is São Paulo, the way we refer to São Paulo, our city. Thanks from, and I'm very sorry about the things related to video and to sound. Sorry, because we have to change the equipment because at the beginning there is no image and then was no sound, and then we had this mistake of the electricity. So sorry, sorry for that. Okay, if you have any questions, any comments, please. I see in the chat what's written, but I don't know if you have any questions. If you are saying something, no. Okay, if you don't have questions, okay. Um, is it possible for a child of the age 11 to get rid of an accent if the accent is part of his family speech? Okay, I try to consider this from the point of view of the perspectives of the theoretical things. Flags says that the quality and the quantity of input is very important. So if you listen to L2 and this listening is not based in quality, that would be more difficult, right? Because you are going to acquire what you hear. And if you are not aware of those phonetic acoustic cues to separate, right, the sounds, it's going to be more difficult. But if you have this formal instruction, then I think it's going to be easier, right? And I guess that's really happens. For instance, I told you about this adult that started learning English as an adult, but he learned phonetics. He learned English phonetics, and he was motivated. So, uh, as an adult, he was able to overcome, right, those difficulties by two means: by motivation, listening, having good quality and quantity of input, and having phonetic instruction. Flag doesn't say anything about formal instruction, but I think that this kind of instruction is very, very important. For instance, listening to sounds and perceiving different acoustic cues. Because if you have, for instance, repetition of words, and then one word is different, if you, in fact, get to pay attention to acoustic cues and have this formal instruction, I think you can improve your performance in the second language a lot, right? I really believe in that, right? And I've seen this happens with people who have phonetic training, right? Here there is another question. Let me see what's it. Another, is it possible? Okay, and there is another person has asked, couldn't the tendency to write down page by date due to the fact? Yes, I've commented on this because when I was just commenting on this word, yes, I saw that was a question raised about this. Yes, it can be, right? Mainly because it's isolation, it's a very frequent word, but it happens with other words. Let me give you an example. I have and the other way around. I have a friend who studied in the United States, and her surname is Porto, right? And she went to the United States, and you have in English the word port, right? So when she was asked her surname, she said Porto, and all the Americans understand Porto. So the frequency of the word in there is the same. It's a very frequent word. But in spite of being a frequent word in English, they heard Porto. Why did they heard Porto? Because of the lack of inspiration. So it's not just a matter of frequency. Of course, frequency is something that interferes, right? As as linguists, we know that. And also the context, right? Of course, many of the things you cannot hear are, understood if you have the context. But that's not the issue. What I mean, and I gave as an example, I could have, for instance, given this word that is going to be very frequent in English, but it was not understood. It was not understood, it was misunderstood because of this lack of attention to perceptual cues. What I mean by formal instruction and is that you are told to pay attention to. There are things you cannot hear, and you cannot hear. And if you are aware of it, for instance, if you are children in a play, I have one of my students who uses activities for the children in a playful way. She's not telling about this sound is this, the sound is that, but she gives input to that child to develop the acoustic cues, right? So in adults, you can tell, listen, this is the cue, pay attention to that. Can you hear that or not? All right, this is what I mean. So yeah, I think in this way, I don't know if you agree, but you see, it's not only the frequency, because I told you this word was very frequent, okay? And then I think there is another question. Let me see. What are your favorite ways of teaching grammar? Well, I really don't teach grammar, although I have taught grammar nowadays, right? But I taught grammar in the past, right? Because I taught uh, English syntax, English morphology, English contrastive analysis. There were topics in our university in subjects we have here at university, but for a long time I haven't taught this subjects because I work as a phonetician for a long period, right? And then I think I'm not the best person to answer this questions. In our university, there are teachers who use this approach, right, based on generative analysis, and also the way the brain, right, processes synthetic structures based in those structures that are shared by language and so on. But no, I don't teach grammar. But I think what in relation, I'm going just to say one more thing about in relation to learning a language and listening to a language. I think one of the worst problems in learning a second language is that some of the kinds of teaching, for instance, language was just repetition. You hear and you repeat. But if you don't hear, you are going to repeat something that's not what was said by the speaker, right? I think this is very problematic in language instruction. Okay. Yes, yes, definitely. And I can tell you by means of this course I mentioned in the extension course, because the students are very enthusiastic about learning those things. And we are following an approach in which it's not giving the people minimal pair, because if you can't listen, the distinction between two sounds, how can you be exposed to minimal pairs? So we are using as a theoretical based model this development of phonological awareness, and this is important. We use a lot praat and exercises made with uh, words that are pronounced. For instance, you can start with things that are sounds that are completely different, listening to, and then starting paying attention to cues that are more specific and difficult, and they are really loving it because they were not aware of it. Think of co-articulation, right? Co-articulation is very important to be learned. And for instance, for Brazilian learners of English, they think that what they hear is the speaker in a faster way, and they try to pronounce all the sounds in a faster way, and that's impossible. That's not what happens in English. What happens is reduction. You have to reduce it to schwa vowel and not to say it faster, right? Some of the students, they are teachers of English. They are people who want to study pronunciation because they want to improve their pronunciation, and they say, well, I always try to speak faster, but it's not like that. It's co-articulation features. The other things, the pitch accent. Okay, for instance, to give an example, if you say in Portuguese, I'm going to say the Brazilian way, give him. It's not give him. And when they are told to pay attention to these things, they are adults, right? They start getting the idea how to pronounce and what are the factors that um, are difficult for them to understand and to produce the sounds, the language, right? So I think definitely I can tell you that works and works. And I have a feedback from the students. They say it's completely different. We learned a lot. We are aware of things we are not, and we are able now to perceive and to produce better. This happens. And also with children. I have another student who I think her work is very original because she works in a bilingual school here in Brazil, and she teaches 3-year-old children, And these 3-year-old children, they are Brazilians, and their parents are, the majority of them do not speak English. So they want their children to learn English, but they do not speak English, right? At least fluently. And then she has lots of fun activities that uses sound awareness for the children to play, right? And it's a very original work. So you can apply those theoretical findings in the literature, right, in the way you teach. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, the questions, the questions that you raised. Any other question? Comment? Is there anyone who teaches pronunciation, Russian pronunciation to foreigners? No? Well, there is one here. I don't know. Thank you very much for this additional example. How could we motivate our adult studies to pay more attention to the correct pronunciation? We use a lot of praat exercises. They are interesting. They are motivated. We use, for instance, videos, and we mention what the native speakers did, for instance, co-articulation in stress, right? Pitch accents and so on. So they usually enjoy a lot. I used to teach pronunciation before. Okay, Nadia. So I think it's very important. And I mean that Fleck doesn't say anything about, I mentioned the speech learning model a lot, but he doesn't mention anything about formal instruction. He just says just quality and quantity of speech. But I think this is very important, quality and quantity of speech, of course. But I think there is something more. And this something more can be given by someone who knows the two languages. I think it's very difficult for someone who doesn't know the other language to teach pronunciation, because he can say, well, in English is this and this and this and this. In Russian is this and this and this and that. But he doesn't know what are the difficulty, these kinds of acoustic cues that I told you about, that have to consider both languages. I think a good pronunciation teacher is the one who knows a lot of phonetics and knows the two languages. I think it can be a phoneticist, a phonetician, for instance, an English phonetician giving classes to Brazilian speakers or to Russians. I think it's not this, that good. I mean, someone who is a phonetician and speaks both languages, knows both languages, right? He can do an amazing job, right? Yes, there is no. There are someone mentioned that unfortunately, course books don't have enough instruction for phonetics. That's true. They do not have enough instruction for phonetics, and there is something else. Teachers are not, aware of the phonetic main important issues. So I'm saying here in Brazil, I don't know how is it in Russia, right? But even in language courses, right? Phonetics is not the topic that is emphasized. No, sometimes not even introduced. Né? So you see that this is very. You have to have some good knowledge of phonetics. And if the teachers, sometimes even the books give some instructions, but the teachers are not able to teach them, right? And phonetics has developed a lot, right? Due to instrumental techniques and so on that can be used to teach pronunciation. But people are not aware of it. Teachers are not aware of it. They can't do that. And another thing that is, I think it's not good, is separating pronunciation as a different activity. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's not, now we are going to talk about sounds. No, it's together with the language instruction, acquiring a language. So acquiring the sounds, the way of saying it, together with the things that are connected to pronunciation. I think these are two things that are important to consider. And I think lots of magnificent materials could be produced by people who learn, who know the two languages and who have a very sound background in phonetics phonology. I think these materials have to be produced, right? Okay. I think there are no further questions.